Going to introduce our final speaker, and that's Dr. Scott Hamilton, who I've also had the pleasure of working with on water issues for well over 20 years. He is a leading expert on Delta water issues, published a number of papers on the topic, and is the chairman of the technical committee for the San Joaquin Valley Blueprint. He's going to share a discussion today about what some of the solutions are to our water supply problems. Scott?
So, I'm Scott Hamilton. I've been, as Michael said, been working in valley water issues for 3 decades now. But up here on the stage, this microphone is very distracting because we're getting a big echo. So, and I also feel like I'm too far away from you. So I'm going to come down here and see how it works. So let's see if this is any better. Well, first of all, thanks for coming. In some respects, it's sort of a sorry state of affairs that you have to be here at all. I can't imagine that there's sort of anyone in agriculture, maybe in the state, that works sort of harder than dairy farmers. You know, it's 365 days a year, 7 days a week. The last thing you should have to worry about is your water supply, but it's sort of, that's the state of where we're at in California. So how many people here think that California is short of water? Anyone? A few people? So we have 10 million acre feet a year of water that flows out the delta that's surplus to every other need in the delta. 10 million acre feet a year. That's one number I want you to remember. The other number is sort of a version of what Mike just said. It's how short of water we are in the valley. His number was like 1.5 million acre feet. But when you look ahead and you see what the San Joaquin River restoration is going to do, what the environmental impacts on the San Joaquin tribs are going to do, what climate change is going to do for water supplies in the delta, the number's probably closer to 2 million acre feet. Right? So there are two numbers. We got 2 million acre feet that we need in the valley, and we've got 10 million acre feet a year flowing out the delta. You would think in California we could manage our surplus water to solve that problem, but we can't. We've done an awful job on it so far. So, I'm going to skip some of these. So the water blueprint was formed, it really started off as a Friant effort, because the guys on the Friant decided that even the way that agriculture itself was organizing around water issues wasn't working, right? We had the guys on the west side of the valley competing with the guys on the east side of the valley, and they were all competing against the guys down in Kern County, and everybody was going to their politicians with a different message. And it was so confusing, the politicians didn't know what to think, right? We couldn't come up with a single solution. We couldn't talk with a single voice. And so the blueprint was formed for that. And it was really meant to be a unifying voice for the valley on water issues, right? A place where people could get together, talk about the water issues, and then figure out what a good solution was that was going to work for everybody. So the blueprint was formed to do that and to figure out the water solution for the valley, to grow the valley's water future. Water meetings tend to be depressing, mainly because there aren't any easy solutions. And I don't mean to make this more depressing than what it is, but whatever water rights, whatever water supply you have right now, somebody else wants it. And some of those people are very effective at going after it. So, we heard Jeff talk about the amount of water that was lost from the Central Valley project through the CVPIA because it was going to environmental purposes. Right? That is a real threat, and it's going to continue. Most of the water that, when you look at how much water was available from the Central Valley project and the State Water project, those supplies have diminished drastically, right? Last year we had a 5% supply on the State Water Project. That actually makes no sense at all. It's just really a reflection of how badly we've been managing our water supply. So the steps to achieving groundwater sustainability are actually fairly simple, right? Farmers are fairly practical people. They look for fairly straightforward solutions to their problems. So we have to sort of start off by understanding what the problem is, developing the new supplies of water, building the conveyance that we need, and then putting that water to beneficial use. And that's really what the blueprint's been focusing on. So Mike went through, where he thought the water shortages were, so I'm not going to repeat that. We've done our own estimates, but I would say that if you're thinking, and you see these signs up and down the valley all the time, right? We need to build more dams. We need more surface storage. That's actually probably not a good idea because most farmers can't afford the storage and the state isn't going to pay for it. So, and I think we saw that with Temperance Flat, right? It was probably one of the more environmentally friendly reservoirs to build, but frankly, agriculture couldn't afford it. For the amount of water we would get out of it, and the amount it was going to cost, it wouldn't have made sense for most of agriculture. The other problem with surface reservoirs is they don't work with California's water cycles, right? California has years and years of wet cycles, or wet years, followed by years and years of drought. And most of the time, the surface reservoirs are going to be empty in the second or third year of the drought. What we are blessed with is really great groundwater storage. So the San Joaquin Valley alone has something in the order of 50 million acre-feet of groundwater storage, unused groundwater capacity, 50 million acre-feet. That would be the equivalent of 10 Lake Shastas. Well, there's no way we're going to build another 10 Lake Shastas, and even if we did, it wouldn't work. Even Lake Mead, which is 30 million acre-feet, is now half empty, right? We need to be sort of rethinking our solution here. So this is a graph of the amount of water, or how the water gets used in the delta. And not to spend a lot of time on it, but the little red bars at the bottom is the in-delta use, used by farmers and communities in the delta. The grey bars above that are the delta exports by the state and federal water projects. Above that is the yellow bars, that's system water. That's the amount of water that has to flow through the delta to maintain water quality in the delta, right? So because it's a tidal system, because you've got salt water pushing in, we've got to push enough fresh water out so that the people in the delta can can have a fresh supply of water. So that's the system water. Then on top of that, we've got the ecosystem water instead of that aqua colored. And then you go above that to the burgundy bars. So the burgundy bars are the amount of water that's uncaptured, that's not needed for any other purpose in the delta. And you can see there's a lot of it. The vertical axis goes up to 80 million acre-feet, right? So we can see, like in 1983, there was close to 60 million acre-feet of uncaptured water that went out the delta. If you averaged all of those burgundy bars, that would be the 10 million acre-feet a year, right? Now keep in mind that agriculture in the valley needs 2 million acre-feet. We just need 20% of that uncaptured water. Sorry, technical difficulties. Michael, once again, has come to my rescue. The other thing that you can notice from this is the years of wet years and dry years, and how important that long-term storage of both the water in the wet years when it's available and then in the dry years. So the reason why we can't capture all of that water in the wet years right now, and we just saw a really good example of that right now, Earlier in January, we had 300,000 acre-feet a day flowing out the delta. 300,000 acre-feet a day flowing out the delta. And the pumps weren't running at full capacity. In fact, there was a while there that the pumps were operating, the state project pumps were operating at 20% of their capacity. So we had 20% of the capacity of the pumps and 300,000 acre-feet a day flowing out the delta. And the reason why we couldn't get more water was because of endangered fish. And so the question is, so 50 years ago, the United States put a man on the moon. Shortly before that, in a few years before that, was when we completed the State Water Project in California, right? We built a system of dams and pump stations and aqueducts to move the water from Northern California down to, through the valley and down to Southern California. And it seems to be in that 50 years, while 50 years ago we were able to put a man on the moon, why can't we figure out how to divert the water without harming the fish? So that technology actually already exists. The fairly simple concept is like a tile drain. You put perforated pipes down in the channel bed, down in the riverbed, and the water just seeps down into the perforated pipes, and then you can just pump it out. And as long as you design it correctly, as long as you make that surface, the downward velocity slow enough, the fish will just float in the water column, right? Fish have this natural buoyancy. They don't just sink to the bottom. And that's true for any life stage, even like larval fish, right? They will float in the water column. So as long as you make the vertical velocity slow enough, the fish will stay in the water column. So essentially, and this system was actually, do we have anyone from Turlock here? Turlock Irrigation District? Welcome. So Turlock Irrigation District built this system a dozen years ago. They put in essentially well casing on the Tuolumne River when it was dry, covered it up with gravel, and that was designed to protect salmon, out-migrating salmon smolts. So really what we need to do is to just implement that system in the delta. Next slide, please, Maddie. Oh, it might be working now. Okay. Yeah, it's working again. So, all right. So that's the first issue. How do we get the water out of the delta, right? Through these diversion systems in the riverbeds. The second problem then is we need to move that water into the valley. And at the moment, we don't have nearly enough capacity to be able to do that. Certainly, we've got the Delta Mendota Canal that will take the water down through the west side of the valley and down into the western areas of Madera counties and the western areas of Fresno County. And we've got, on the state project, we've got the California Aqueduct that will take water down to Kern County. But there's a very big part of the valley that we can't get delta water to. And that's sort of shown, this is the ERA map that's showing where the critical water shortages were in red. And then the dotted white lines are areas where we could put new canals that would link up to the existing canals that we've got. So the thinking here, like what happens this year, right? It's the winter and springtime where we get all of this surplus water, and that's probably where it's going to increase with climate change, right? We'll have more precipitation falling as rainfall, less as snow. So it's really important that we can capture this high flow water in the delta when it becomes available. Of course, at that time of the year, we don't have much irrigation demand, so we've got to store it somewhere. And the logical place to store it is in groundwater in the San Joaquin Valley and in other subbasins. So to do that then, we need to build this new system of canals. And that's one of the projects that the Blueprint is working on. This fits into a larger set of projects that I'm not going to go into any detail on. But when you put all of these projects together, we really start to come up with a solution for the California water crisis. It involves a lot. It involves getting that extra water out of the delta, bringing that water down into the valley, and then partnering with other people, particularly some of the urban entities in Southern California. I don't know how many of you have heard of water banking programs. I've been involved with several of them sort of through my career. They're really good opportunities. I know in some places in the valley they've got a really bad rap, but that hasn't been my experience. In my experience, when you partner up with an urban entity that has plenty of money, they typically have a water supply and money to bring, and they're really looking for a place to store water. What they need is a 5-year supply of water during a drought. So if they can store, typically what would happen is that they would store their water in a groundwater basin. The host of the water bank would keep half the water and return the other half back to the urban entity. And the urban entities will then provide capital to build the facilities that are needed to make the whole project work. So it works for them because they desperately need the water during the dry years. And it works for the people that are hosting the groundwater bank because they get extra water and they get infrastructure, they get subsidized infrastructure. So it has worked really well. Together, when you put all these projects together, then it really looks like there is a solution for the water crisis. It's just like so many other things. It's just very frustrating trying to get all of this to happen, right? We're talking, people are used to talking about surface and are familiar with surface storage. They're not so familiar with groundwater storage, although that's essentially what's been happening in the valley forever, right? We've been, the snow melts, flows out of the valley, seeps into the groundwater basins, and stays there until you need it, right? That concept is not new. And with a newer technology now about diverting the water out of the delta, that's not rocket science either. Right? That technology's been around for a long time. But to get people to think about that and to think about the different ways of doing things, to think about how you can provide long-term reliability to urban areas, how you can achieve groundwater sustainability in the farming areas, these are all possible now. However, it's going to take a lot to make it work. And Jeff and I spend a lot of time talking to a lot of different people. Because there are a lot of people that don't think the same way that you think, right? There are a lot of people in the Bay Area that do not want any more water coming down to the San Joaquin Valley. They don't actually care if they have to get their milk from Wisconsin. They don't care whether we have 50,000 people unemployed in the valley, right? They want water flowing out the delta. They don't really understand where their food comes from, right? This is what we're battling against, right? We have politicians that are a lot more concerned about the environment than about farmers. And I'm not anti-environment at all, right? There's got to be a balance. But we haven't really seen that balance. We haven't seen that balance be implemented yet. It's the job of the State Water Resource Control Board to get that balance, but it hasn't been happening, right? We are desperately short of water in the valley. We've got 10 million acre feet that's flowing out the delta. We need 2 million acre feet. And we need to find a way to make that happen. And that's what the blueprint, that's what Jeff and I spend a lot of time on. We've got Christina here. Thank you for coming, Christina. So the blueprint represents a very large part of the valley. We're working really hard to try and make that a reality. It's going to require support. It's going to require investment. And we're really gearing up to try and make those solutions a reality. So with that, I will turn it back to Michael.